Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people write to me asking where is this coming from. This is not coming from me by any means. My role is to give this away. This is coming from everyone and everything. It's coming from everywhere. So how do you gift this somehow? It's a strange thing. Energy in general. It's a strange thing. This specific energy as well. Like, what is it? Why now? Is it something in us? Is it something happening at this time in the world? You know, like we've been using music for a long time, for example. So what is it about sound and vibration that seems to be bringing people in depth? So there could be some simple explanations of this energy, and a lot of this can actually be explained through science. There's so much science, sometimes weird, strange science, but we're learning so much about the body, the mind, the brain, spirit, all undergoing transformations together. But to start out from a spiritual awakening perspective, I think there would be a lot of useful things for you to pick up on in a way that maybe you can relate to this. I would like to do that you can relate to this in a personal way. So you could own it, you know, that this is just as much yours as anyone else's. A lot of trainings happen in a way that a lot of people are just asking for permission. Is this okay for me? Am I good enough? Do I have enough permissibility? Do I have enough to share this with others? I find a question like that interesting. And I want to like outline why in some interesting, strange ways. So yeah, I'm from the Philippines. I'm 46 years old now. Spirituality wasn't something that I ever did. I never did spiritual things when I was younger. It just happened to me in a way. It came to me through crisis primarily. I was depressed. I was asking a lot of questions about what's the point? Why are we here? What are we doing here? What's the point? So I was led. I think I heard voices that spoke this general message that something is bigger. So much bigger than we know. So my spiritual awakening actually happened in the US. I was in California in 2002. And I was in this depression asking a lot of questions. Nothing was making sense. And something happened that changed my life forever. I basically woke up one morning and I heard this voice that said, there's someone outside and he is looking for you. And who would believe that kind of thing? You know, that level of synchronicity just doesn't exist. And I was this corporate, burnt out yuppie who was going through a dark night of the soul. So I went outside anyway, decided to trust it. Trust is a big word in this journey. And when I went outside, I actually did meet this strange Mexican man who was just there, and he was looking for me. That's according to him anyway. He said I was waiting. So we went up this mountain, and he told me about my whole life. He told me about my childhood. He told me about what was happening to me at that time. He told me about what was to come. And numerous times I asked him, like, who are you? What are we doing? What's happening here? His only answer was like, I'm you. Like we're one person. It took me a long time to understand what that meant. But But he showed me something basic that belongs to the spirit. And it's the definition of what healing is. Like, what does it really mean to heal? I think to be healed is to be seen as you truly are. He had this ability to look at me straight into my eyes, and it was like he could see my time. It's a very strange thing to say, like, what does it mean to be seen as your time? It's like he could see me in a way that he could see my past and my future, and how all the choices that I was making at that very moment of being seen had a way of spreading across yesterday and tomorrow. Like today, right now, is everything else. I grew up with a lot of fear and anxiety. I was abused when I was young within family, and I was always really small, like super small, super thin. And in school, I was bullied like a lot. And I guess I absorbed a lot of this from my father, who experienced his own trauma. He basically was shot when he was like 3 years old, and someone dropped a gun during World War II, and the bullet entered here and exited there. So he grew up with a glass eye. He had one eye. And he grew up with a lot of shame and guilt and fear, and somehow this was passed on. I used to be really scared of people. Like I couldn't talk to people. I had no power to sit with anyone. Every time I was with a person, I would run away. But whilst I was all of this, at the same time, even though I was always being attacked and projected upon, being abused, there was something about my body and my mind that had the ability to absorb like all of this pain, as if I knew that it was petty. Like a lot of this was nothing. It was petty. It's bullshit. It's not. It didn't mean anything, So there was something about my metabolism. There was something about my body type that seemed, when I was young, like it was weak. Like I was always the smallest person in the room, and I always like wanted to run away from everything. Yet at the same time, I had this superpower to just absorb as much pain and as much negative energy from others in a way that it didn't actually do much inside my system. So there's this huge paradox there. So when I had this meeting with a Mexican stranger it was in California, around the LA area, in what's called the San Gabriel Mountains. It was almost like all of the pieces came together. All of the separate pieces that never made sense. It was part of just chaos, and this chaos. It almost seemed like everything was just one story. Like everything had to happen for a reason. And it's like the story of the whole universe, and the story of me, and the story of all things. I don't know. It just felt like I went into some kind of trance. And the reason why I did it, people ask me, why did you do it? Why did you walk away from the world? Why did you just step away from everything? I went to the biggest schools in the Philippines. I owned companies, and one day I had no money. I was wearing a pair of shorts. I had a sarong on and a pair of slippers. I didn't even have a shirt on. I basically just walked away. I literally just walked away. And I thought I was going to take a walk, but I just kept walking and I just never went back. So people ask me, why did you do it? The biggest part had something to do with what the Mexican told me. That he told me that there was an old mother, like an old grandmother, and she was searching like for us. She was inside of us, and she was calling us to come to her. And so I started to see this old grandmother everywhere. I could see her in my dreams, and it's almost like she started to become everyone I was talking to, as if all the conversations were just part of one long continuous conversation. So when I would hear something spoken by one, it seems like everyone else kept continuing the same conversation. I was talking about some kind of story about the earth, that the earth was changing, and yet the story was really old. Like the story was really, really old. So it just, I guess all the messages hit like a peak point, and I just could not listen to it. So I walked away. I just walked away. So I was walking away for a couple of hours, but like I just kept walking. And what seems to many people like this would be the hardest thing. Like this sounds like the worst thing, the hardest thing, to leave without money, without food, without even like a shirt on your back. It almost felt like it was the easiest thing to just walk away. A lot of people probably judged me because I didn't tell my parents, and I just got lost. People didn't know if I was alive for many years. So people would see my back as if I was walking away, rather than see me walking towards. I believe that we're all hearing this voice. We just don't know how to listen to it. It's not a personal or even an archetypal voice only. Spirit needs to speak to us through symbols and icons and images, but the voice is a vibration. It's like a sound. The sound is in our body. The sound is, that's a gecko, by the way, if you can hear that. The sound is in the earth, as if the earth itself was a song, and the body itself is a song. So I walked away. I walked for about a year. I slept where I needed to sleep. I was invited to eat when it was time. I just walked across maybe one of the biggest islands in Asia. It's called Mindanao. It's in the Philippines. And I found bits and pieces of the puzzle. There were bits and pieces of the story of the earth, the story of the human, the story of language, the story of culture, the story of the mind. I think the story is embedded everywhere. You just need to, I think a huge part of it is freeing up your body and your psychic energy so that you could see the interconnections. And when we're loaded, when we're stuck, and when we're filled up with all of these attachments, you won't see that story. You're going to be bound up, too bound up that you won't see the story. But when you get disentangled enough, you somehow see how the parts intertwine. And all I saw was that there was this optimism that in the face of all this despair that I was feeling, this desperation, this depression, what I saw was there's this hope, there's this positivity, like there's a chance, basically. So I was given these instructions that I needed to find some island that I was seeing inside my mind, my dreams. So I left for another island in the Philippines called Palawan, and it was really quite interesting. When the Mexican stranger introduced the mother, he said her name is Kali, and my name is Pai. And the name of the island that I found was Kalipai. And that was the word for happiness in Filipino. So I basically lived there for 2 years. The Philippines is the second largest producer of coconuts on the planet. And it's also the highest source of electricity in all known foods in the world. So I'm basically a highly addictive person. I love food. I'm very emotional. So this would have been the last thing that I would think about, to live in a mono diet, which is to eat just one kind of food. I was reading up on these texts about these breatharians who don't eat food anymore, don't drink water anymore. So I was interested in this ascension work, this possibility of raising vibration from inside. Now, I don't like to dance. I don't like dancing. My sister is a famous dancer in the Philippines, so I didn't know what to expect. I was given the instructions by Spirit, stay here until the conditions were met. So I didn't know if maybe my body would just float into nothing, or I would die, or I would gather superpowers or something. The first year of staying as a hermit without contact with other human beings is quite intense. I can't describe it to you. It's like going on a detox, when you quit something, like a vice, for example. People quit smoking, try to get off alcohol. There are these withdrawal symptoms. What happened to me was I felt like I was puking out the world of illusion. It was so hard. It was really difficult. I had blood coming out of parts of my body that, like my eyes, my ears, my skin. It was like I couldn't hold this pain that was like physicalized in my system. So I entered into a really dark night. I really went deep into a letting go. And slowly, like it happened, light happened. It was in the beginning not so noticeable, but it was like a pinprick. I could see there's something that would come out of this. So being like a weak-ish person, I really had to face the fear. When you're in the city, when you need a source of energy, let's say you're tired, you're depressed, you're lonely, you could always go to the ATM machine and draw money out, and you can always go to the store and buy food, or you can always log on to the internet, call your mom. But when you're stuck inside this situation where you can't go to anyone, there's nothing's for sale. And even if you had a lot of money, you can't buy anything. Then, what do you do? So I was stuck in this situation where what do I do now? I hate it here. It's so hard being alone, and I'm hungry and I'm thirsty, and the only source of food is up there. And I don't know if you've ever climbed a coconut tree before. So especially if you're going through this really low point, it was, it's like every single day I had to keep doing it. And it was so difficult, but it was so good. All the parts of me that were so weak had to go through, like a very authentic mode of prayer. I had to really face death. It's like my fear of going hungry had to fight with my fear of heights. So I had to keep climbing up every day, and it was quite an experience. So I grew from all those. I wasn't expecting really so much would come, even though a lot of the message that were coming through was speaking some grandiose visions. I was minding my own business one morning. I was in a hammock, and I was just, being lazy, swinging. When I heard this voice, and it said, the mother and I are now one. And then my body just started to move. My body just started to move on its own, like it was another person altogether. It's like I lost control of my body. And then there was a particular sense of power along with synchronicity. So I was kind of freaked out, but at the same time, I was fascinated, because it felt like I knew what was happening right before it happened. Like something was in rewind, and I knew that this was supposed to happen a second before it happened. So there was a sequence of knowing before time everything that was happening. So I let it be. And then I heard the words, it began in Africa. And then the whole world just really exploded on me. Like the whole thing became one large sound, and the sound was coming from my body. And suddenly I found myself dancing on the beach. And then I was in this, I don't know, I didn't know that that much power could flow through a single human being. There's so much energy coursing through me that I basically experienced my mind just jump out of my head. And then I was just watching this thing underneath dancing with so much power, and I didn't know what it was because I wasn't me anymore. I was like a cosmic baby that just got here without the ability to conceptualize anything. So I was just looking at everything, taking it all in, looking at the sand, the water, the person, not knowing what sand, water, or person, or earth meant. So I stayed there, like I was inside my body. I was doing these really wild movements, like juggling things with my body, doing somersaults with this kind of martial artsy dance thing that seemed to mean something. I literally had to remember my way back into my person, to remember memory, remember details, so that I could become my ego again. And I really had to try my best to go back into a three-dimensional reality. And then I was just there. I literally just had this awareness that something just happened. And that was huge. It was like an affirmation that all of the intuition or trust that I put into this was justified, because I had burned my bridges. I literally just walked away, and I was guilty. I felt like, wow, I left my mom. My mom's probably suffering right now. She doesn't know what happened. And my dad died when I was in the island. So, like this is something important. Somehow this is something, this needed to happen. So I stayed there for about a year more, and there were more experiences. I was given more guidances. The island for me was like a school. It was like a school of energy. I never learned anything from anyone. This thing really just downloaded itself so that this would move, and I'd see colors, and then that would happen, so that when two people arrived on the island lost, looking to find their way, and like me, finding it exactly there, when I touched people's bodies, that was it. The same energy that was coursing through me started to happen to them. And that was amazing. It's like, I didn't learn this from anyone, and I didn't teach them anything. This energy knew what to do, so that as I touched them, they too exhibited the phenomenon. So I don't want to get stuck with the idea that this is about the body moving on its own, or that energy flows through you. Be focused on the fact that this is a dimensionality. This has something to do with time. Like I would ask you this question now, like, what is time? Is it just this line that is a sequence of points that organizes events? What is time when you're sleeping? What is time before you were born? What is time after you die? What is time when you dream? What is time when you go into the psychedelic journey? What is time in the spiritual experience? What is inception time? What is interdimensional time? And are you allowed to enter that, where a day is not a day anymore? And what is here is not just what is here. It doesn't take that much. It's not that much that separates us between here and there. And I think we really just found an opening. So to make that long story short, the energy just kept, but it knew what it was doing. It wasn't me, it's Earth. It needs somehow some modes of transference or a story or a series of events that allows this to be chosen, co-created, experienced. But don't see it as something we do. See it as an intelligence. It knows what it's doing. We sometimes think that objects don't have intelligence, thoughts don't have intelligence. Yet many words that you speak are a lot older than you. And they're just using you as a vehicle to have continuity. So energies unto themselves can have intelligences. So what I had to go through was to watch this transfer or move through different countries, like in Asia, in East Asia, South Asia, across the Americas, across Europe, across Africa. I basically held and trained about 20,000 people in the last 16, 17 years. And I haven't been teaching so much the last years. So I've seen the state. I've seen what could happen when people go there, what you might call source, the universe, cosmic experience, the quantum reality. You name it, you can go there. What I want to give to you today is this is ours. This is not hard. I've seen small children do it. They literally would just go there, and then they would hold the energy, hold others, and then people would go there. It just needs to be trusted and be allowed contextualization. And then when you meet it, in whatever way, you heard something, your intuition spoke to you, it doesn't take that much. So in the Philippines, when this began, how it would happen is in the space of an hour, like the space would open and the energy would come, people would heal each other, people would lay down and a healing would happen, and then they would go home. The first news article that was written about this was everybody can be a healer. So the whole room becomes one. We're suffering with this experience of walking into many rooms and the rooms are separate. Yet deep down, we know that it's one. So I began with my story to give a somewhat interesting explanation of what this is. Were you to die, and if time doesn't exist as an absolute thing, if it's relative, that means time is an illusion. In a way, in a timeline, you've already died and you haven't been born yet you try to keep going back into time to experience certain points. That's not actually linear. It's spread across a whole field of possibilities, and you would go back to moments like these just to look at your notes. What would happen were you to die? Would everything stop, or would you still be there? Would there still be a consciousness? What would happen to that consciousness? It would simply go into a dimensionality of time that perceives the construct from beginning to end and everything in between, not in a linear way. So when I spoke about this thing about me that's weak, that was about weakness and fear, and yet having the ability to trust, there's something about letting go and surrendering that allows you to absorb everything that the world is projecting. Everyone's projecting it. No one wants to own it. No one takes responsibility. It's like you wake up and life is like war. You have to go to war again. You have to go to battle. You have to fight, and everyone's trying to win. I lived in the US as an exchange student, when I was 16. So I had a close look in terms of what it is like to live there where you are now. And it's like that. It's like going to war. It's like competing. It's always this competition. It's always like you have to win. And in school, in high school, you can't be this loser. What I find interesting is when you study the whole process that allows so much power to come through you, I really think humans have it the other way around. In some ways, the more you lose, the more you win. But we're not allowed to let go. We're not allowed to not fight. So rare is the time when we actually open up the body and the mind in a way that just absorbs what seems scary, which no one wants. It's like the scariest thing to be projected upon, to be judged, to be abused, to be hit. But what does it mean to see that all of this is petty? It's all an illusion. And when you have the ability to convert darkness into light from within, would that not possibly be the greatest gift that stops this chain of blame and guilt and takes ownership over what is not new? There's something very old about that's being passed on. There's something ancient about that's being passed on. And when you have the ability to lay down and allow that to come through, basically, the experience is something like becoming the earth. It's like becoming the earth. So there's a reason why a lot of people share that this experience is like going into like the womb. Like, what is the womb anyway? Is it like a place in the mother's belly? Maybe that's a literalization, but what could your consciousness have looked like? How were you seeing the world when you were there, when you were inside the womb? Within that energy bubble, there's creation at work, and it's not just you. This bubble isn't just you. Like, how are you even making things up? How are you making the universe? How are you constructing a reality? How are you creating a planet, and how are you storing it inside each and every body that you inhabit? These memories are there. They exist in every cell, in every ontological thing. And it's a vibration that allows that remembrance to come. So we seem to use music in the process. But it's not music. You are made of vibrations. And going back to this understanding that to be healed is to be seen. Were you to be seen as what you are, and if you are a universe, what would be the language that is able to let this be received? So somehow sound and vibration has been traveling for a long time. We've produced a vibration. This vibration is traveling. What we're learning is how this could be received. So in any moment, there is trust. In any particular moment where you are allowed to open, you would receive it. And this would surprise you. This is supposed to surprise you. That is the game. That is the theater. That's the movie. That your sense of smallness is important. That shatters ego, that allows for the opposite, which is bigness. The energy is big. Our ego is small. Our fear is small. So when we work with that fear and that, feeling small in a humble and simple way, it's the energy that takes over you, that is a part of you that lives, that just breathes, that moves. And it's you don't need to get attached to the phenomena. It's not really about, like power seemingly emanating from you. It could happen in simple ways where you simply recognize, okay, I simply know what I know, and I will be led without attachments, without having to get addicted to particular phenomena or patterns that I can see happening in others that I want to keep happening inside myself. Something could just go into a renewal. And I think this is what's happening that's interesting now. We have to be open to the intelligence that might show up differently, even in your own space that may not have been so seen and felt before. That is the level of ownership and responsibility you could carry with this. So I spoke a little bit in a way, but in a way this maybe encompasses a lot of where this is coming from. There's so much that could be shared in relation to what's happening, especially in the brain. The brain is changing. Our brains are super changing. The autonomic nervous system is changing. The circadian rhythms are changing. The chemicals, the neurotransmitters, the hormones sending signals that allow for synaptic connectivity is shifting in a way that suddenly we're fired up, we're electrified, and there are many understandings of the changes that are happening in the brain regions. I don't feel this is the right place to do that because it takes days, weeks, and months to unravel the neurology, especially that is reshaping, something that took a long time to program, not just in your life. Our neocortex, our reptilian brain, our limbic system, they're old. They hold old historicity. It's enough to enjoy and to watch the changes because you are kind of beyond the physical anyway. You would be interested in the brain and in the central nervous system if you feel you would like to do like a seasoned therapy with this, like you really want to systematize this. And a lot of the reason why we hold so much of that system is we are working with schools, we're working with doctors, we're working with people in the system who require the science. But if you don't require that, it's more than enough to just understand there is a neurology of trust and a neurology of fear. Maybe go map that a little bit, just so we can go into a bit of framework. So there's this, sorry. There's this double helix in the body that can be easily drawn as a double relationship between electricity, what's called electricity and magnetism. And how we might see this is there are brain states that are traceable, delta, theta, alpha, beta. The interesting thing is when you go higher than beta, say you go upper gamma or high oscillating frequencies, magnetism starts to exhibit the properties of electricity. Okay, so these are neural oscillations, they're brain waves. Like delta would be slower, theta would be faster, alpha, beta. He's getting faster and faster. But in the normative sense, the faster waves are hiding at the lower part of the body. And when we're controlling, when we're stuck in our heads, this is where we operate from. So in a way, what we're trying to understand is how does magnetism, which in a way is the mind, how does it drop? Because what we've been observing globally is when systems of interpretation and systems in control drop, electricity rises in the body. Electricity is flow. And it's very interesting to watch and to see what that electricity does. There would be the sensory experience, there would be the kinesthetic experience, there would be the visual experience. Suddenly you start seeing things you know, people talk about colors they've never seen before, or you enter into a kind of dream, you know, that talks about the story of all stories. So people talk about the story of the earth. I became the earth, or I went back to the beginning of the earth. It's really interesting what can happen in an hour or an hour and a half, actually. And that's what you might be called to do, to construct a journey into deep time or deep history within an hour and an hour and a half. It could be with your mom, could be with your child, it could be with, you know, there are ways to do this now. So what you want to study is how to allow magnetism to drop and electricity to rise. You don't need to use music per se. There's a way in which your own words, your language could allow for something to die, even as something is birthed. You know, you could speak in a way that allows resistance and fear to descend, and allow inspiration and power, insight to arise. In general, this is the trick. You are learning how to hold the masculine and the feminine, and vibrationally, it's very, very slow and very, very fast together. So were you to define what is the trance, what does it mean to go into a shamanic state? This is all. This is it. It's the ability to hold death and birth at the same time, recognizing that they are one and in the same thing. You can expand this conversation on and on. Wherever you look at, whether it be the nature of language, the nature of the brain, the nature of the biological body, the nature of matter, you would see the same principles. And somehow change and transformation takes place when both elements meet. And the reason why we're not experiencing this is we live in a world that's very high in magnetism and has really lowered our feminine, the electrical inside of us. So something happens when you drop magnetism, something happens to time. Suddenly time starts to expand. It feels like a day, or an hour is not an hour. And these are mechanisms in the body. You can actually just describe these very, very simply, that this is the sympathetic nervous system. If you know what the sympathetic nervous system is, it's fight or flight. And the parasympathetic nervous system is trust. So every time you expand something, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And when you allow something to let go, you let go of the sympathetic nervous system. All of these are simply vibrations. They're wired across your brain, your heart speaks a lot. Your breath holds a lot of this awareness. And when you go into these interesting moments when the sympathetic and parasympathetic co-activate with each other, and let me talk about those 4 instances when they co-activate with each other. There are 4 instances when they're both on at the same time. One example is when people go into psychedelic journeys. There's a co-activation between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, because a psychedelic is a combination of a stimulant and a depressant. In the spiritual awakening, these also awaken at the same time. They also co-activate in the REM state when we dream. And then the other time it tends to happen is when we experience the life review during the near death. Okay, when people die, almost die, and come back to talk about what happens, they experience what's called a life review. So when you study all of these together, and it's important and exciting that they have this neurological construct that supports what's taking place. When you go into the psychedelic journey, when you have a spiritual awakening, a really authentic one, when you dream, and when you experience the life review in the near death, what's the commonality? The commonality is something expands, and that is basically time. Time perception is a science that talks or thinks about how time changes when you let's say drink something, or when you hear a certain vibration, or I don't know, something happens that. So when you dream, time changes. And when you die, people say your whole life will flash before your very eyes in just one moment. And when you go into a psychedelic journey, like a few hours can become like a universe. And when you have a spiritual awakening, very often in the process of inner dance, people say that that was not a day. It felt like I went to the beginning of everything, and I had to make my way back here. So what we're giving and altering is time. When you give this feeling to people, what you're giving people is time. And one of the traumas and pain, one of the illusions people hold is there's not enough time. The time is limited, the time is a line. But how you're able to hold this, and music and vibration is one of the most powerful ways of altering time, especially if people are laying down in a position that allows them to receive time. What you're giving people is the question, how old are you? How long have you been here? How long have you been doing this again and again and again? And if you can speak that vibrationally, they will, and they might go there. You just need to be open, and maybe even you might go there. So that could be that's not just a spiritual concept. The brain can be altered to receive time, to perceive time. The body could be touched. The body could be spoken to in a way that it remembers its age. You know, how old are you? Are you 40? Are you 50? Are you 30? Or are you what you are? You know, just because it's so rare that this is asked, we're never asked, and we don't become it. But going back to this principle, to be seen is to be healed. If you're seen as that, then maybe you are. You could be, and maybe you could speak this to others. And imagine if this is spoken to a child, instead of like, no, you're 2 years old. No, you're 3. Maybe the child could be spoken to. No, you're a universe. You're from where you just came from, and you're not just having to forget. Can you imagine what that would have done, were it be that there was an awareness there before language and memory and personality and identity and ego?